Morning, welcome back to Sydney.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's your third visit down to Sydney now, and this time it's springtime.
Yep, finally. The last two times it was in June, I think. Still, it was amazing. For me, winter with all that sunshine, you can still sit outside and have a nice coffee. Yeah, it was like, it was fantasy to me.
Well, yeah, Tokyo, you grew up in London, but have been living in Tokyo as well, and then more recently Seattle. Maybe share a bit about your very atypical background for a Japanese person.
Yeah, of course. So I was born in England, and I say I was there until I was 15, but I spent a year in Japan when I was 9, and then went back to England, so back and forth really. My dad was a stockbroker. He worked for one of the Japanese firms based in London. We were there for a while. My parents were there for a very long time, 30 years, as expat, surprisingly. Usually you would become a local, or if you're an expat, you're told to go back to Japan after 3-4 years. I don't know how he pulled it off, but somehow he was an expat in England for 30 years. So that was why I was born in England. And then when I was 9, came back to Japan, did a bit of school there. Then the next time when I moved back to England, I was in a Japanese school in London, so a full-time Japanese school in England.
Prepare you for high school in Japan and university and such.
Yes, exactly. Up until then, I was educated in English, but I had a bit of a hard time when I was back in Japan for that year. So my parents decided that, maybe a bit of a Japanese education would help me.
Yeah, I imagine the culture shock, having been doing schooling in London, and very different culture. Going back to Japan, I did a brief homestay where we attended the local high school in Japan as part of my high school trip I did to Japan. The culture was very, very different between the schools. I imagine that would have been a tough adjustment being
Absolutely.
there full time.
Especially as a kid, and when you're at school, the schooling system is very different between Japan and elsewhere. Especially, it was all the rules that really surprised me. So there's a rule in the system to do basically everything when you're at school, from what kind of pencils you're allowed to use, what kind of notebooks you're allowed to use, where to put your pencil box, when in your drawer, where to put your scissors. It's a very efficient system, but it's extremely rule-based. So I try to look around and make sure that I'm not messing up the routine.
Sounds like a tough adjustment. But then you did high school in Japan, university in Japan. You attended a very prestigious Japanese university, which are generally too modest to talk about.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I went to Waseda University. That's one of the major private schools in Japan. So yeah, that was good. I actually went to Waseda High School. So that's the affiliate high school of Waseda University. Right. It was a boarding school. My parents were still in England, so I went back to Japan by myself, attended Waseda's high school, and then went all the way up to Waseda University. So usually you have an entrance exam to go into Waseda University, but I didn't, so I went there. It was like a bit like a backdoor listing, right?
The important thing is that you graduated with a degree and then got yourself a good job in equity sales.
Yeah, so I then moved. So after I graduated, I actually did an engineering degree. My dad he was a stockbroker, so he wanted me to do something else really. He wanted me to be an engineer. So did my engineering degree, but I was just really fascinated about the concept of finance. So eventually I just decided to follow in my dad's footstep and became a stockbroker in Japan. So I joined Barclays Capital in Tokyo as an equity sales on the trading floor. But it was fun. I learned a lot, and I don't know why, but they made me cover domestic clients. So I thought I was going to be there and become like an international sales and pitching stocks to international investors. But I think 80-90% of my clients were domestic institutional investors. So there was lots of drinking and lots of going out with clients and lots of relationship building. Which was a very good lesson for me, and I learned a lot from that. But at some point, I was in Ginza and Roppongi going out drinking with my clients, and I felt like I might be a bit overpaid for what I'm doing. So I wanted to build a bit more on my hard skills and learn a bit more about, the nitty-gritties of finance. So then after a few years with Barclays, I decided to leave and join KPMG in their M&A advisory practice.
In Tokyo, I imagine that meant a lot of hours in the office.
Oh yes, I think, you really work around the clock, and 2, 3 a.m. and then late nights, and then you go back in the office. Late nighters and all-nighters happen from time to time, on the weekends as well. So I was working most of the time when I was there, but it was fun.
And you had a young family then, so that would have been...
I have a son, and it's a funny story. So I did 4 years of M&A advisory, and during that time, my son was born. So we were there together. We were there together. Then I quit KPMG and then decided to do my MBA in London. And when I was in London, my son asked me one time saying like, "Daddy, have you ever lived in Japan?" Like, yeah, I was there with you, but he didn't notice. So that was how much I was away from home when I was doing M&A.
How much in the office? Yeah, it's crazy.
Japan.
And I think I've got a couple of friends who've gone to London Business School, but when they talk about London Business School and their experience there, it's a very different picture. Going there when they're single and just enjoying life. Quite a different experience for you, but still an enjoyable one.
Yes, indeed. Well, for me, I finally got time to spend with my family, so that was a great thing. But if you're single, then you just have to cover your own costs. But now I'm not working, my wife's not working, then we have a child, we need to daycare. So with all of that, all the costs added up. So, we were living in a student dorm. 3
of you in the one-room dorm?
Yes. We were sitting, my wife and son was sleeping on the bed, and I always got the mattress on the floor. And the floor was very uneven.
Oh, wow.
Our son rolls over and he lands on me
a
few times. but it was fun times, yeah.
I think what we're establishing here is personality accustomed to a bit of hardship and pushing through and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I guess so.
You're a co-founder of Senjin Capital.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come to happen? Maybe you can tell people how we met from your perspective. I obviously know from my perspective, but...
Yeah, of course. I met Jamie when I was working for Tyo Pacific Partners, which is my previous employer. Tyo Pacific Partners is a US-based, Japan-focused activist fund. They're really one of the pioneers in the space. They've been around for 25 years now, and one of the first to start activism in Japan. I was there with them, had spent a few years inside on the ground, and really noticed the landscape changing. So back when I joined Tyo Pacific Partners, that was late 2019 to early 2020. Even that's only 5 years ago, but activism wasn't a thing in Japan. It was not a career choice. But fast forward to 2-3 years later, or even today, there are so many activists everywhere around. After a few years, I noticed things were changing very quickly. After seeing a few activist campaigns being successful, or the takeovers happening in the market, I started to think to myself, okay, what could be the best strategy if I were to start everything over? So if I can start from scratch, what would be the best strategy? And I had an early form of strategy, which is today the Senjin strategy, and had that in mind. And one day, this recruiter messaged me with a job description. But what was more important than the job description was the strategy that he laid out. So apparently this PM who wrote the strategy, apparently there was a PM that wrote this strategy, and the strategy on that message was surprisingly similar to what I had in mind. So I was pleasantly surprised and impressed that there's somebody out there thinking something very alike. And I was actually even more surprised to find out that guy was actually sitting in Sydney. Yeah, I thought it was a great opportunity. So I did the interview with Platinum Asset Management and then eventually got the offer.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to go ahead with the strategy at Platinum for other reasons, but thankfully you agreed to join me in doing that outside of Platinum with Senjin.
Yeah.
From my perspective, when we were looking to recruit someone, the perfect Japanese person to help me with the strategy, my list of requirements was quite extensive for the perfect person. I really thought I was looking for a unicorn. I wasn't expecting to even tick off most of them, but the requirements that you ticked off were understands both cultures, West and Japanese, intimately, speaks Japanese like a native, speaks English really well and practically almost like a native. Background in consulting, private equity team at Boston Consulting Group, understands equity markets, has been involved in shareholder activism, and has a corporate finance background as well. So really just ticked all of those boxes.
Yeah. I mean, a bit flattering, but I don't know, we never talked about this, but what did you think? What appealed to you? Like, apart from my background, what did you, during the interview process and things? Maybe a bit of interview feedback?
Oh, well, it was all of that stuff. But you really understood the opportunity, I think, in a way that some of the other people we interviewed did not. And on top of that, there's a humbleness about humility and modesty, but still a sense of that you're sure in yourself. A lot of people are humble because they're a bit uncertain or whatever, but you were quite comfortable in expressing your views and pushing back when you thought someone was not correct in what they were saying. And so I think those qualities have really come to the fore since we've been working together. So I think we were right on the selection.
Well, thank you.
Worked out very well.
I never heard about that.
There you go. Joined Pty Pacific back in the start of 2020, but then COVID hit. So your experience with working for an activist was somewhat atypical, I think.
Yeah. So I joined Pty Pacific. Again, they're a public equity activist firm, but they're very close to management and very friendly, hands-on style. And one of the things that they were doing at that point was to actually take a board seat and also help send people on the ground inside a company to work together with the company to improve the business. So I was hired at Pty Pacific, and while I was waiting for my green card to come through, I was offered to go work for one of the portfolio companies inside on the ground. I said, yes, I would happily want to do that. But I didn't really notice that company was based outside of Tokyo in rural Japan. It was like an hour and a half trip on a Shinkansen and then another hour drive. So it was really kind of in the middle of nowhere. But that was a very interesting times. And yeah, but it was quite an experience. I told my friends that I'll be moving to the US, working for an activist. I'll be back from time to time in Tokyo and I'll probably stay in 5-star hotels. But turns out that I'm in rural Japan and the accommodation, there were no hotels down there. Yeah. So I was based in a very old company apartment, corporate housing. They simply had space because it was too old that none of the employees wanted to. It was an interesting experience. I had
probably luxurious after the dorm experience at London Business School.
Yeah, that is true. I've gone a few hardships at that point, so it was an upgrade maybe. Yes, there were lots of cockroaches in the room. So
great.
And I tried to expense the cockroach busters on my expense report one time, and my colleague in finance thought it was some kind of mistake. So she called me and I went through what was going on in the story, and she was quite sympathetic.
I did. Japanese companies are pretty distinct organizations culturally, both from each other in Japan, but also definitely how they work relative to how companies work elsewhere in the world. And because people don't really change jobs, the idea of outsiders coming in is, one that could be a bit tough for people to become receptive to. So, how did you deal with that challenge? How did you build trust and really become part of the furniture at the company and then help drive change internally?
Yes, of course. But especially it's hard. Well, being an outsider is hard. Joining the company from outside is often hard, but When you're working for an activist, it gets even harder. Everybody thinks that you're a spy. And, you know, what information you give to that person and what you talk about. Everything is very sensitive. It was sensitive in the beginning, but you know, it was the company, the people at this company were really great. They have very kind, well-hearted people. So I love them. So I went out for dinners, drinks from time to time, and then after a few years, we really become very close at a personal level, and you build those relationships. So I'm still in touch with many of the people, and I just really love that experience.
And this is a company that seemed willing to embrace change, so you're able to get some internal initiatives off the ground, and you know the share price performance and operating performance of the company was really improved while you were there.
Yes, eventually. But in the beginning, one major difference, I guess, coming from a consulting job was that when you're in the consulting project, you have a problem that you need to solve, and then you solve it. But whereas when you're inside a company and trying to improve things, there are so many potential projects that you could work on, and selecting which one was really the key. And during that selection, I kind of had this mental map, the 2x2 metrics, like any consultant, of the impact and also appreciation. Right. So sometimes, you know, it might not have much of an impact, but there are some projects that the people inside, the management wants to work on, and that builds trust and goodwill. So it's very important. I thought it was very helpful to work on those things as well along the journey, so you get to know each other, you get to show that you could become of help to them, and then eventually you get to once you build an established relationship, then you get to do the projects that will have more impact on the share price and really turns around the company.
Right. You know, from your experiences, what do you think some of the low-hanging fruit in terms of operational improvements that could be probably generalized across many Japanese companies?
Quite a few things, but I think the consistent theme, and this is not just about this company, but Taiyo was involved had similar arrangement with other companies as well, and we often talked and we looked at many other different companies as well. What we noticed was that the lack of data usage, really, how you use data effectively, you derive insights from the data, and then you take action. The simple flow sometimes is not followed through in an organization. So what you need to do, and this is not, when I say data, it's not like big data or AI or anything like that. It's just basic managerial accounting. Right. Of, say, like, what's the profitability of the business, what's the profitability of the product, what's the profitability of a certain geography, or is this factory making money, etc., etc., etc. So it's no rocket science, but using that basic data to bring in strategic insights. And from there, another thing that's very important is to be able to communicate that findings in a very simplified way, be it a dashboard or it could be on slide, whatever. But if you're able to communicate that findings effectively, it's easier to persuade people. They've noticed, you know, rather than somebody pointing out a problem, if you can see it's painfully, when you visualize it enough, it becomes very obvious. It calls for action and it becomes very obvious. And it's much easier, again, than somebody telling you what to do. You notice your own problems and the whole organization moves.
Yeah, I imagine it would be very difficult to know which products to invest behind or which ones to stop producing if you don't really know the profitability of the product, or you know, the flow-on profitability from selling a given product.
Exactly. Many times in many companies, we often ask, do you know the true profitability by products? And you would find actually in many cases they will say no, if they're honest. or they say they know, but they actually don't. It could be calculated. The calculation could be wrong. It might not be accurate. So even those very basic type of financial analysis could bring a lot of value. There was a time when we were reviewing the profitability of each product groups that the company had, and one of the products on the surface seemed like it wasn't making great returns. But if we dig a layer deeper and look at the cost allocations and everything, it turned out that hardware was actually generating pretty good returns. And also on top of that, if you account for all the supplies and all the additional earnings that the product will earn throughout its lifetime, the lifetime value was actually much higher than most of the products.
So you had the follow-on consumables sales, that razor and razor blade model.
Exactly.
And that wasn't being accounted for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can see how the things like that could slip through the cracks. But why do you think that those improvement opportunities aren't obvious to people inside these companies? And if they aren't obvious, why don't they bring in other people to help them?
Yeah.
Or if they are obvious to people, why don't they really push to improve and be more profitable and be better?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's a consistent theme across Japan. I think there are two things maybe. One is management incentives. So you only want to make those changes because you want better returns. You want to make more money, and often, surprisingly, making returns may not be the top priority of the management. They might be focused more on, because changing things sometimes hurts, it's not easy. So the management might be more incentivized to just make sure nothing bad happens.
So disturb the wa, or the harmony.
Exactly. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is probably around not being able to get insights or information about what's happening outside the company. So if you take say like this rural company based in rural Japan, you join the company out of high school or university, and then basically it's lifetime employment. So you stay there and you know everybody for a long time. You rarely get people from the outside. So, like I talked about back in my school days, when people stay together, and if you're Japanese, you start creating internal rules and a system. And that sometimes make it harder to make changes. And, if you're inside a single system, then I just lost my train of thought. If you're inside an organization you rarely get people from the outside. So
you don't get to see what best practice looks like elsewhere, and you don't get that cross-pollination of ideas.
Yes,
in the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're in a Western company, then you might have your CFO probably would have worked for a financial institution, maybe a consultant from outside that came in and rose to that position. But whereas a CFO in a Japanese company, he or she might have started as a salesperson in an organization, went to production, did general affairs, and then got the finance role 2 years ago. So that level of specialty is very different to a Western peer.
I think in your engagement times, you encountered people in the position of de facto CFO who didn't even know what EBITDA was. And the Japanese word for EBITDA is?
EBITDA. So yes, even the basic financial terms like EBITDA, ROE, ROIC, you would expect a Western CFO to know most of these. But, Japanese companies, it's not that any of these people are not capable or not smart. They're very fine people, very well educated, very hardworking. But it's just that it wasn't relevant until recently. So, and they just didn't get the opportunity to learn, or they never had the necessity of learning any of those things.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like, what have you seen that's changing a bit with these companies now, or the incentive systems changing? Are we seeing a bit more desire for people to drive productivity growth and earn better wages or have equity incentives in place? How are you thinking about that?
I think it all goes back down. If you look at the history of Japanese corporations, it's really about the stakeholders. So I think, when sometimes I hate it when people say, oh, why don't Japanese management do that? Are they stupid? Are they not capable? Or, are they not incentivized? Are they greedy, lazy? No, none of those. It's really the stakeholder structure that was surrounding them. In the past, the key stakeholder, because shareholders were never the real stakeholders of the Japanese companies, at least in the 80s and 90s, for example. It was the banks that was providing the risk capital at that point, but after the bubble burst, the key stakeholder became employees, really. So there is no incentive to go an extra mile to create shareholder returns. So that environment creates the risk aversiveness of the Japanese companies, and that really flows through the organization.
So it's more about not making a mistake rather than that, I guess the American model of move fast and break things, or try many things and see what works.
Right.
Expecting a lot of things to fail.
Yes.
That's kind of flipped on its head in Japan, where it's make sure it's going to work before you try it.
Yeah. Harmony is more important than innovation.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We've gone into private equity, investment banking. You could have stayed in management consulting. Why shareholder activism?
Well, why shareholder activism? It's an interesting field, and there's of course the financial return and the intellectual curiosity, but it's pretty much, a lot of it is quite personal and it relates to my background. So, like I said, I was born in England and raised there, and this was in the outskirts of Greater London, so I was really a minority back then. I don't think there were like 2 Japanese kids in the entire school, but no more than that. So I was a minority, and it sucks to be a minority as a kid, right? You're different. But I had some moments that I felt very proud of Japan and being Japanese, and often behind that, Japanese companies. And this was back in the late 80s and the 90s.
So Game Boy and the...
Exactly. So I was very proud that Nintendo was a Japanese company, Sony's PlayStation, and also I remember watching a movie with my dad. I forgot which one it was. Maybe it was Jurassic Park, but there was the lady in the movie was saying, "Oh, is that a Nikon, or is that a made in Japan, or something along those lines?" And I didn't get it, so I asked my dad what that meant. So he told me that Nikon's a Japanese brand, and made in Japan is like it means quality, and it
demonstrates value.
It demonstrates value. So, and I felt really proud about that. And if you go to Piccadilly Circus, all the ads up there, many of the ads up there were Japanese companies.
Right.
So, all of that reminded me that I was Japanese, and it made me feel very proud even as a child. So some Japanese people, when they go outside of Japan, end up not liking Japan, hating, never comes back. And some people actually end up growing a strong affinity to your home country and culture. Yeah. And I was clearly the latter. So I really love Japan, and I love the culture, and I love Japan. Then fast forward to 2010, when I followed my dad's footsteps into stockbroking. It was the landscape had really changed. Japanese companies were no longer what they were back in the 90s. Everything was taken over by the Chinese and the Korean companies. Apple and the American companies, and nobody was interested in Japan. All the ads on the Piccadilly Circus, Piccadilly Circus was probably pretty much taken by the Korean and Chinese peers. So that made me feel very sad, of course, one thing, but I also wanted to, so that's when I kind of changed my career to, rather than, I thought I should change my career to be able to support Japanese companies and being able to improve the companies itself, because they were undervalued for a good reason, I guess, at that time.
Yeah.
So that took me into advisory and consulting, and I think activist investment is really helps us do that. It really is about improving Japanese corporations. You get to, when you do activism, you really get to help Japanese corporations and improve them, and alongside you get to make money on that journey. So I really love the career and concept.
So I get the sense of the national pride there. There's also the monetary side. I mean, the opportunity from the financial aspect obviously must have been quite appealing as well when you look at the valuations of companies and the potential for operational improvement, the potential for industries to consolidate that have never consolidated, the ongoing governance reform that allows all of this to happen.
Yeah.
But then ultimately you want to see big, strong businesses. Yeah, so there's obviously a clear opportunity for activism, particularly amongst the smaller companies. So if you look at the US or Australia or the UK, a lot of these industries have really consolidated, so the smaller companies have kind of gone. Like take the paint and coatings industry, for example, where in the States there used to be a ton of listed companies in that space. Now it's basically consolidated down to 2 big ones in the US. In Japan, you still have like 15 paint and coating companies publicly listed, let alone all the ones that are private. That's just one example. You see an opportunity for activism to help drive consolidation, help free up a lot of resources that are deployed unproductively?
Yeah, absolutely. There are 4,000 publicly listed companies in Japan, the same number as the US, which is crazy because if you take a look at the entire market cap, I think it's 8 times. So on average, Japanese public companies are 1/8 of the size of its American peers. Like Yamaji-san, the head of TSE, says, the number of publicly listed companies should go down, and he emphasizes on the importance of quality over quantity of publicly listed companies. So that's definitely the direction. Until recently, maybe a bit still, but being acquired or being consolidated. So in Japanese, you say baishu, you get bought out by somebody else. It has a very negative connotation. So, and people just didn't want that to happen. But like you said, if you look at the economy as a whole, there's a lot of inefficiencies because of the industry just being so fragmented. It just gives you less bargaining power towards your clients. And also, you have all the overlaps in the industry. You have too many back offices, for example. You have each publicly listed company has an IR function for the 4,000 companies. That's already quite a bit of an inefficiency.
Each company has its own sales force, its own R&D department, its own everything.
Yes, exactly.
In some cases. And then they struggle to compete against larger scale Chinese or Korean businesses because they're never consolidated. They don't have the same resources.
Right. And usually that ends up in the lack of, the difficult. So Japan is in a labor shortage. What people say often is that Japan is in a labor shortage, but it's really about the efficiency. So if you consolidate, then you get those labor, and you can actually pay higher salaries if you consolidate and if you become bigger. And you can also invest in your products. You can invest in IT, become more efficient. So yeah, again, if you look at the system as a whole, more consolidation means more efficiency and more benefit for the overall economy.
Yeah, example I sometimes use is Japan has 5 elevator manufacturers, and the rest of the world outside of China, excluding the Chinese at least, there's 3.
Right.
Which definitely makes for less efficient operations and very low profit margins and lack of ability to reinvest.
Yeah.
So they seem to have lost out a bit on the global scale to the big Western ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the market, there's obviously just this incredible opportunity opportunity because of the valuations, because management teams have never had to care about shareholders. They've stored up years and years and years worth of earnings on their balance sheet in the form of just cash holdings, investment securities holdings, real estate holdings. Oftentimes you can find, particularly amongst the smaller companies trading for a third of the market value of their assets, or even less. How do you think we see that change over time, and what role do activists have to play in that? And what does that mean for investors with activist funds?
There's a huge opportunity there among the 4,000 publicly listed companies. When investors started buying Japan, they start from the top with Sony and the Toyotas, but the fund hasn't really flowed through to the bottom. So if you look at the valuations of the micro caps and the small caps in Japan, it has gone up a bit, but it hasn't risen crazy. And especially on an absolute basis, like you said, there are companies trading at a discount to their tangible assets and tangible book. So
a big discount.
A big discount. A big discount. So correction, I think there is going to be a correction, and there is a lot of
a positive correction.
Positive correction. Yes, it's almost like a glitch in the financial system. Elsewhere in the world, this will be corrected instantly, but it has been because of the governance structure, because of the social structure. It has been left like that for decades now. But over the past few years, it seems like it's finally correcting.
There's a lot of activists that have moved into the market. They range on a bit of a spectrum from super friendly, 100% only do things aligned with management, like Taiyo Pacific. Umezaki Capital is probably another example of that. And then on the other end, you have the super aggressive, highly confrontational, such as Mr. Murakami, maybe a couple of others. What do you see as the optimal strategy, and why is that Senjin's?
Yeah, so there is definitely a spectrum. And the difference is what ultimately what the activist asks for, whether that be Taiyo, whether that be Murakami or Oasis, it doesn't really, we're all talking about the same things. So the value creation opportunity, the capital efficiency, business improvement, all of those topics are somewhat similar. It's really about what happens if you don't listen. And for the friendly style, which was pretty much the only way that was accepted back
10 to 15 years ago.
10 to 15 maybe years ago. That was the only way around to go about with activism in Japan. So you provide lots of data, you become basically like a free consulting service for the companies, and if the companies like you, then they listen. But I think the difference now is that the more louder and the more louder type of activism is becoming much more acceptable over the last few years, and shareholders can actually exercise their shareholder rights.
Yeah.
So, but still, I'm a strong believer of constructive activism. If you can work with the management, and if you can work together with the management and improve the company, then that's much faster and that's much more effective than doing a campaign and going into war. So we want to be helpful, we want to be engaging, and if the company wants to change, then I think we will pretty much do anything to support them.
Yeah.
I think the slight difference is, even after that, if the company is still not taking action, the difference, I guess, is that we're not shy about using shareholder rights as a shareholder. Yeah. And of course, never in a hostile or publicly shaming way. I think we want to stay professional. We're talking about business. We're exchanging views about how the business should be improved, and using shareholder rights to advocate that. So yeah, that's the style I think would be most effective in Japan today.
The name Senjin Capital, Obviously wasn't my suggestion. My Japanese is not that good. We went through hundreds of potential names, English names, Māori names, given I'm from New Zealand.
Oh yeah,
And
English names.
Some of them we liked.
course.
Some of them we liked the sound of, and then you mentioned them to your wife, and she's like, "Oh no, that sounds too
Right.
too girly,
That's
or
a bit
too
weird,
this or
or-
that. Sounds too much like this in Japanese."
Yeah.
But we came up with the name Senjin, and so what does that? Maybe you could share what that name means, or the multiple meanings of that name, and how we've adopted that, and how that relates to our investment style and process.
Right. Multiple meanings. So three main meanings for Senjin. First is Senjin Okiru. It means be a pioneer. So pioneer is the first thing, the first meaning. We want to be a pioneer in this industry. We're the relative newcomers in the activist field. We want to try out some things new, want to be innovative. At the same time, we want our portfolio companies to think outside of the box, and be, if it's in a consolidation situation, we want them to be the first movers and be the consolidators, for example. So that's the first meaning, pioneer. Second is ancestor. Senjin, in Japanese you say Senjin o Uyamau, so respect your ancestors, or what came before. So we want innovation, we want to push things forward, but at the same time we want to have respect. We want to be respectful of the culture, we want to be respectful of people. So that respect element is reflected in the second meaning. The third meaning is Senjin. This is actually, even Japanese people don't know about this third meaning, but you say Senjin no yama, Senjin no tani. It means 1,000. It's like a metric.
Unit of measurement.
Unit of measurement. So it's like it means like 1,000 miles deep or 1,000 miles high. So it means we want in our research we go deep, and in terms of relationship we go we're long term.
Yeah.
So those are the three meanings of Senjin Capital.
Those are the three meanings. We talked a little bit before about the friendly stuff of being able to use your shareholder rights. There is a fourth meaning of Senjin, which you didn't tell me about at the time we adopted the name. I think that one had slipped past the radar, but when I mentioned it to someone, they started drawing out the different kanji,
Right.
and they came up with a fourth meaning.
Yeah, it also means say like war formation, or like the god of war. There could be some meanings like that too. But obviously,
definitely not the primary thing we're focusing on.
No, that's not.
Thanks a lot for joining us on the video. It's great to have you down here in Sydney. Maybe before we finish up, we could talk a little bit about what we did last week. We're in Tokyo.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of interesting meetings. What were the major takeaways from that for you?
Oh, many things. I mean, I remember, when we had the conversation with an interpreter, she was saying that usually she doesn't do these finance type of meetings. She's actually, it was like a medical translation professional, but she had to cover for her colleagues because all the IR and financial interpreters were fully sold out.
Fully booked.
Fully booked.
Too many international investors now interested
Exactly.
in Japan and coming in and taking up all of the interpreters.
So apparently it's catching interest, and many non-Japanese people coming to Japan. So that's, one thing that you would quickly notice. Another thing was probably about the deal situation. We often go around, talk with banks too, but I think it was one of the LBO lenders saying over the last fiscal year they wrote 270 LBO loans, and this year, starting from this fiscal year, starting from April, it's only been 6 months, but they've already surpassed 200.
Yeah, wow. It's incredible growth, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. So, and everybody, all the bankers were saying, oh, we're so busy with all the deal flows. So really seems like there's something happening down there.
Real buzz around the place.
Of course. What did you think? I mean, any highlights during this trip?
Well, I was a little surprised, I have to say, or maybe encouraged to see that we have a bit of a reputation now amongst other fund managers. So we spoke to a number of fund managers while we were there, and most of them, or the vast majority of them, had noted that we made a substantial filing in a company, and had started to think about doing some work on the company themselves.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, I guess, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You don't always want people seeing exactly what you're doing and buying on market. But it's, I guess, somewhat as well gratifying to see that people know who we are and respect our approach enough to want to have a closer look at what we're doing.
Yeah, that's true. And it was fun drinks.
Yeah, it was fun having drinks with people and catching up.
Yeah.
So the interest is really building amongst global investors,
Yeah.
among Japanese activism and Japan generally. The opportunity we see is incredible. You've got deeply undervalued small and mid-cap companies. They just need a constructive activist to come on board and help them realize that value. How can investors get involved with Senjin Capital and see some of those returns come through in their portfolios?
Yeah, so we're now raising for our first fund, Senjin Fund 1. The amount of interest we've got is fantastic, and we've done the heavy lifting and we've identified great opportunities. So if you're wholesale investors and interested in getting involved, then please reach out to us.
And you can reach out to us on investors@senjincap.com. That's our email, investors@senjincap.com, or via our LinkedIn DMs. We're currently building our website. It may even be up by the time you see this video. That will be senjincap.com.
はい、それではありがとうございました。またどこかの機会で。Thanks for watching everybody. We'll see you soon.